Vamos a empezar en español hoy. Buenos días, Orlando Sánchez, aquí con mi compañera, como siempre, todas las semanas, Andrea Gómez. Y hoy tenemos un invitado especial. So, our rule is 80-20, 80% in English, 20% in Spanish. I just wanted to kick off in Spanish. So, I am joined on this side of the table by my dear friend.
Hola, hola.
Andrea Gomez, good to have you. Good to see you. She made me get rid of my gum before we started.
And the hair.
Yeah,
And fix your hair.
well, whatever little hair I have left. Anyway, today is a special day because all the way from Austin, Texas, we have a dear friend that is taking time out of his very busy schedule, because I can tell you he covers the entire state of Texas, and his name is Rafa Bejar.
Rafael.
That's right. For you that don't speak Spanish as well as we do, let me repronounce that. Rafa Bejar. And
hello, buenas.
I call Rafa the Q-Tex. Actually, my sister was the Q-Tex, and Q-Tex means Cuban Texan. So, Rafa, you're from Corpus Christi, Texas.
I was born in Corpus. My sister was born in Houston. My parents came over from Cuba, and this is where they settled. My father redid his residency in. He was a doctor when he left Cuba, and he went to school at Baylor and did his residency in Wessex County Hospital.
Excellent. And so now you and your family live in Austin or San Antonio?
No, we actually live in San Antonio, and I work with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is based in Austin.
Good. So the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Andrea, is one of the premier sort of think tanks in the state of Texas. And I'll let Rafa talk more about it, but anytime you have a question about public policy with respect to free markets, education, important issues affecting Texans in the state of Texas, the Texas Public Policy Foundation, TPPF, as we like to call it, is a great resource. So I recommend that to you.
Okay, well, today's topic is education. Since Monday, we've been seeing a lot of things on the news about the future of education after the pandemic or during the pandemic, because we're still in the pandemic. So Fort Bend ISD announced that they're going to go full online classes. So then other institutions are saying that they're going to start a school in person on September 8th. So everybody is like, they're not sure what to do. So tell us what is, what we think or what we see is going to be the future of this.
I wish I could, because we do live in uncertain times, and at the moment, there's not, the leadership isn't quite clear on what's going to happen. And obviously in the state of Texas, we have independent school districts. So the school districts basically
tell everybody how many school districts we have in Texas.
I don't
hundreds,
know.
Hundreds.
I think I want to say like 1,800, something like that. Mm-hmm. So school districts, it's quite a lot. And in comparison, Florida is the school districts are delegated by county, and there's 67 counties in Florida. So there's only 67 school districts in the state of Florida, and here we have close to 2,000.
And in Houston, we have dozens.
Yes,
in the surrounding area.
Right. So and then each of them operate independently, almost like their own little fiefdom, and they basically set the rules. There's some overall guidelines from the Texas Education Agency, but for the most part, they operate independently. And I'm afraid that what we may see is a patchwork of start dates for the school year.
Well, yeah, nothing is uniform. But I want to ask you a question, because a friend of mine who's a physician brought it up that there's a study in New York and international studies about the fact that children aren't transmitting among themselves the virus. And so I heard yesterday that on NBC over the weekend, one of the weekly political shows, I think it was, they invited 5 pediatricians from around the country. And with complete unanimity, all 5 said they wanted their children back in school, that it was safe. It was probably, and one of them, I think, commented it, the safest place, and particularly for inner city kids, is to be in school. Have you guys done any of the research with respect to the studies that have come out?
No, unfortunately, we haven't. That's not one of our fields that we've been taking a look at. But I have heard similar reports, and that in amongst our circles, I can tell you, people are eager to have school start again and have the kids go back in school. And I think it's number one for the health of the family, right? I mean, the parents need a break. Also, Andrea is shaking her
We need a break.
shaking her head in agreement. And also parents need to get back to work, because that creates unfortunately a childcare situation, right? Because a lot of parents focus, not that education should be a childcare, but I mean that they spent a lot of time there. So and then also it's very important for the mental development of the child, and of the students, and of also the physical interaction with children. I have a 5-year-old son. His name is Maximo, and I can tell you he's eager to go back to school and just to play with his little friends. And my wife is eager to go back to school too. And children need that social interaction with other kids, and that's very healthy. Now, to make sure that there is a safe health component, but again, there hasn't been a lot of as you mentioned, a lot of transmittal of the virus amongst the younger ages.
Yeah.
And for those, we're gonna remind people, for those just start connecting with us today, TLC Live, like every week.
You're okay.
Like every week.
You're learning English.
I'm
really
learning.
Well.
I'm still learning. Like every week. Today we're talking about education, because we've been seeing since Monday that some of the school districts are announcing that they're gonna go full online in 2020, 2021. That's why we are here with our friend Rafael Bejar.
Very well said.
And so we want encourage you guys to ask your question, hagan sus preguntas, and we want to ask you, are you ready for your kids to go back to school, or you rather to have them online? It's it's a dilemma that the parents are having right now because of the safety because they feel like probably the kids will be safe at home, but at the same time they need to go back to school, to work. And as you were saying, the interaction of the kids are very important, socialize. And I was talking to my kids, like, I noticed it that they are being more productive at home than being at school,
right?
In many other ways. But my kids were like, yeah, but we don't want to miss those memories.
Yeah.
We don't want to just go to college and say, like, well, we didn't have any memories with the friends, with school, like normal people.
The other thing I want to mention, Rafa, is I also heard yesterday the public impact. For example, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of healthcare workers in the state of Texas need to have their children in school so they can go to the ER, so they can go to the ICU, so they can go to the hospital, so they can go to the clinic. And if these parents can't find a place to put their 2 or 3 or 4 kids, the RNs aren't going to be able to go to the ER. They're not going to be able to go to the operating room. They're not going to be able to go to the ICU units. So there's tremendous public implication and impact for not opening the schools.
There's a lot of ramifications to this, Orlando. I mean, talk about your gigantic onion that you're peeling back layers, right? So on the one level is what you were talking about, and then other levels include, there's been a tremendous debate here in Texas and across the country on school choice, right, and providing other options, educational options for children, and here in the state of Texas and across the country. And that has been stymied a lot by the teachers' unions. And then now we're forced in a situation where schools can't operate. So, and then now there's a greater debate on, opening up avenues for school choice, like online learning and homeschooling and things like that. So that's that's something that's good. And then there are other ramifications, like, okay, so if we're going to online education, well, what are we going to do with the schools, the brick and mortar schools that we have right now that we are paying
The
for.
highest tax rate in the state of Texas.
Exactly.
School districts.
It's school districts. What do we do with with that with
Get our
that
money back.
with that M&O, right? That
Yeah.
maintenance and operation, right? And if we're going to go to online, even for a year, I mean, should the question should be raised? Well, is that money going to be refunded back to the taxpayers?
All right. Well,
La-
that was one of the questions, Orlando, that I mentioned the other day on the comments when this news just break on Monday. People were commenting and saying we want our taxes back, and we want to have the option to choose what school or what to do with our kids.
Right.
So let me talk a little bit about politics, because my entire life is politics.
No.
Yeah. And the conservative leadership in the state of Texas, in my opinion, I always say one thing Republicans are good at is missing opportunities. That's my position. You don't have to acquiesce. And here's a great opportunity. The unions in the state of Texas and across the country, the teacher unions, who don't really care about kids, they're worried about payroll, vacation, less work hours, lower workload, are advocating for no classroom time. So this is a great opportunity. I posted on my personal Facebook page. If the unions won't educate our children, then fund the parents so they can choose where to have their children educated. So why aren't Republicans standing up and seizing this opportunity? This is a great opportunity. Everybody in the unions and the educrats are in unison. We don't want kids in the classroom. So let's offer an alternative. This is a great opportunity for school choice, for funding parents, for bringing in competition in education.
Well, I can tell you that this discussion is right on the crest of the wave, right? This is just happening. I mean, these reports of school districts announcing that they're going to either not meet or pushing back opening of the schools is happening just now. And I think that you're going to see that there is going to be a much deeper political debate on what's going to be happening with these with the opening of the schools, and also the taxes that we pay for these schools within the next month or two.
Rafa, I don't recall the number. I think it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars. I may be wrong, but what is the budget of the federal Department of Education that Jimmy Carter started? Remember, we used to spend nothing, zero tax dollars at the federal level, because I want to explain to you watching that education is strictly a state enterprise. 50 states set the policies for public education in the 50 states of the United States. The federal government doesn't educate the kids. The federal government doesn't provide teachers. The federal government only creates a massive bureaucracy to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, which was started under the leadership of Jimmy Carter back in the 1970s. You could take that money right now and fund the private sector, and parents that have an interest in education are nonprofit institutions of faith, churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever, and create a private education system without raising taxes. In fact, we probably could eliminate property taxes and just fund it with the federal dollars we're sending to Washington.
That has been a major debate for a very long time. You're absolutely right. The mandate of educating students has been in the full purview of all the states. It has not been in the federal government. It wasn't until Jimmy Carter, as you correctly pointed out, that in the 70s that he created the Department of Education. And I don't remember, the exact number, but I mean, it must be extremely high in the billions of dollars. And that money, there's been discussion of, as one option is just take that money and just divide it into block grants and just send it back to the states and let the states do what the states are supposed to do,
Exactly.
which is to help provide for the
and lower the tax rate.
Exactly.
Because on average, I'm only speaking for HISD, which I'm a taxpayer. By the way, I pay taxes. You guys have to understand this. This is the system we have. I own property in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 counties in the United States. I pay property taxes in 5 counties in the United States I have no child in
Right.
public education. And I can tell you as a taxpayer, I am not getting my money's worth. Here in Houston, the third largest school district in the nation, the Houston Independent School District, with a multi-billion-dollar budget, has a tremendous dropout rate among Latino kids. What the heck kind of service am I getting from my public dollars? So it's time that policymakers in Austin reformulate, recraft, and reinvent education in the state of Texas so that delivers for the taxpayers. That's my opinion. As you all know, that the O in my name doesn't stand for Orlando, it stands for opinion.
We have a question. We have
Yes.
a question that is Manny, and he say, why is the federal government pushing to cut funding to schools who won't open in August? Aren't Republicans for smaller government and let states and local authorities to decide what is best for their community? Isn't this a political move by the White House?
Yeah, well, no, it's not a political move. First of all, I'm paying federal taxes. In fact, yesterday, taxes are due today. I wrote my big check to Washington, D.C., and part of the money that I sent funds the Department of Education that does absolutely zero in the state of Texas. And so, yes, we should deploy those federal dollars to do something else that perhaps infrastructure or perhaps healthcare, but not education. That's the responsibility of each and individual state. So I'm glad, in my opinion, that the White House is proposing cutting the Department of Education funding when there is no education going on.
You said it.
So now somebody's commenting saying, well, parents are teaching the children now. And that was something that I had a conversation yesterday with somebody. It's like, yeah, parents are teaching the kids right now, but not all the parents are really capable to teach their own kids. Not on that kind of education, of the school education, the education of when it comes to manners, to education in the family, the values, yes,
Mhm.
but not all the parents are capable to teach the kids on the level of education of the schools.
I wholeheartedly agree. Pedagogy is not a talent that parents are endowed with.
Correct.
There is a reason why teachers go to universities and earn their undergraduate masters and PhDs in education. There is a technique and a science to education. I don't take that away. And by the way, my comments are not meant to, my wife spent many, many years as a public school teacher. And there are the vast majority of the school teachers are dedicated individuals and dedicated to the children. I'm talking about the leadership of the unions. I remember back in the 1970s that the unions had driven the auto industry into the dirt in the United States. There was a time in this country where unions were important to protect worker rights because the capitalists were taking advantage of them. And I still believe that's the position, that we ought to protect workers, that we ought to make sure that Americans are receiving a fair wage. But we shouldn't let the unions abuse the taxpayer and do what they did to the auto industry. There was so much legacy cost in an automobile in the 1970s that auto manufacturers, the big three auto manufacturers in the United States, were going broke. And that's what happened is that the Japanese started building little Toyotas, a car called a Corolla, and that industry has grown to be very competitive with the United States. That's what's happening in education, that the unions are driving public education and the limited tax dollars into the ditch. And so we have to come up collectively, we, the electorate, the taxpayers, the citizens of the state of Texas, with an alternative education system que nos va a rendir. In Spanish, that means that will serve us, that will deliver a quality education for our children.
I think that there needs to be a reform of the public education system, certainly here in Texas, and I think in many states across the country, and that and again, it needs to have two prime focus. Number one, the actual education of the student, right, and then also the wishes of the parent. And I think that those two factors need to be combined, right? And that parents should be given more options on the education of their children, right? And For some, that might be public school. For others, that might be homeschooling if they are able, and there are a lot of resources to, to become, homeschool if that's the way that you want to go, or a private school of some kind.
But Rafa, let me play the devil's advocate,
Sure.
okay? Because I hear a lot of my conservative friends, Republicans in Austin, talk about that. Oh yeah, the parents, and they ought to make a decision and they can choose between. Education is a very difficult task. I mean, parents, we saw the scandal on these college admissions, right?
Oh, yeah.
Parents paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to get little Tommy or little Pedrito into the best schools possible, right?
Right.
So there is a science behind it. There are a lot of urban.
A science of scamming, or is a science of
No,
what?
no,
I don't know what you mean.
a science of understanding the importance and preparing children for the ACT and the SAT, a science to writing essays, a science to getting recommendations, a science to assembling all this so that when the kids present an application to a university, they're well reviewed. And so that's very competitive. So now, to my Republican friends who believe that, just fund the parents, they'll make the choices, there are literally hundreds of thousands of urban poor in this city of Houston, and a lot of immigrants who have no education but want a good education for their children. They have no clue how to prepare these things.
Yeah.
So what do we do for them?
Well, and then I will counter with you, and there's a lot of schools in the various school districts in the state of Texas, including right here in Harris County, that are underperforming or outright failing.
Yep.
And not only that, but I will also say, and this is some of the research that I did myself, in that it's not one school that's failing. What I found is that there are instances of what I call systemic school failure. So you have in certain areas, and again, they tend to be in the predominantly economic disadvantaged areas across the state. But you have a failing elementary school, which Lord knows how you have a failing elementary school, but we do have low performing and failing elementary schools. And then those kids in the feeder pattern get graduated, right? They get moved on, passed on to a failing or underperforming middle school, and then on to a failing or underperforming high school. So
one of the saddest things, Andrea, and this is why I'm a huge advocate for a quality education system. I hate that we're in this debate about public education, private education, school choice, and vouchers and all this stuff. Yeah. At the end of the day, I started politics in 1992, and we were having a debate about vouchers, choice, homeschooling, and here it is today in 2020, and we're still having the same debates. It is time that leaders step up and provide quality education. I don't care if it's public, private, homeschooling, vouchers, choice, free market. The children in the state of Texas are the ones that are suffering. It is a sad commentary that one of the greatest Congress members ever from Texas was a woman by the name of Barbara Jordan. Whether you agreed with her or not, you have to admit that she was an intellect and served her 18th congressional district in Texas. I was always an admirer of Barbara Jordan in the 1970s as a young man in high school. Barbara Jordan, and I may be wrong, graduated from Phyllis Wheatley High School, a historic Black high school in urban city Houston. That is one of the consistently failing schools in the city of Houston. How can we do that to our fellow taxpayers? How can we walk away from public education and say, well, we're going to wash our hands of this urban education problem? Folks, it's time to stop the politics, come up with a system that educates our children. We have some serious challenges in urban areas, and it's high time we roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Well, I will say that, part of the irony, and, and I know that you probably see this as well, is that the politicians in Austin that advocate for putting more money into public schools have their students primarily in private schools, right? So, and then they have the option, to pick the education method for their children, but unfortunately, other parents do not. And that's one of the things that, at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, is that we want to maximize those choices, right? We're not saying do away with public schools. And I agree with you 100% that schools need to be managed more efficiently, and that the resources need to be dedicated to the classroom, to the students, to the teacher, right? Because a lot of this money is going to all sorts of other frivolous things, and it's being wasted in sort of, accounts and, for, favorite, sweetheart deals for vendors and that sort of thing. And it's not going into the classroom. It's not going for the student or for the frontline teachers.
I couldn't agree more. I wish the classroom had the attention that the head coaches and the football teams get.
Yeah.
The most beautiful scoreboards, the most beautiful arenas, the best AstroTurf, the best video equipment to review the plays. Folks, if we put that much dedication into the education system as we do into Friday Night Lights in the state of Texas, we might have a more productive state. Can you imagine? We can fix this problem in one generation. In 18 years, if we committed to educating our children in the state of Texas, in 18 years, no one would stop this state. And frankly, it's just sad that we've debated this for, 3 decades.
It needs a pandemia to come to play on us, on education, and open our eyes.
What's a pandemia?
A pandemia.
Pandemic.
So, but
it's not a pandemia in English.
No, but you're absolutely right. It needs something that fundamentally shocks the system in order for us to be able to review. Because in Orlando, you're right that we've been at the Texas Public Policy Foundation was created 30 years ago, and we've been talking about this. Is one of our founding issues, is providing more education opportunities for the children for 30 years, and we still haven't been doing that. And then and I do want to, just go back just 1 second. So you mentioned about the football stadiums and stuff like that. That's only part of it. I think that one of the greatest problems with the system is that the system eats its own. So if you take a look at it, it's not only those extracurricular activities that you were talking about, but it's school bureaucracy, right? And that the average teacher gets paid, I don't know, between $50,000 and $60,000.
That's terrible.
And then what happens is that in order to progress as a person, you have to either, and you're a teacher, you either have to switch careers and go out of teaching completely, or you have to jump to the administrative track. That's where all the bloat is happening, is on the administrative side, right? Because the teachers want to go ahead and they want more money for themselves, but the only opportunity to do that is to shift over to administration. So why do we need more administrators than frontline teachers?
I got to tell you something. I went to an award ceremony at a school district here in Houston. It's not the Houston Independent School District, but it is another school district just on the west side of Houston, just outside within the city of Houston. I'm not going to mention. I don't. But
I won't put you on the spot.
But here's what happened. It was an award ceremony, and they were giving awards to teachers. And as Rafa said, these teachers that are making $50,000 a year, $50,000 a year after 4 years of college, many of them have masters, so that's 6 years of college. They're getting $50,000. And so they're given an award, and attending this award ceremony is the superintendent. But not only was there a superintendent, there was a cadre of about 16 other people, and they were deputy superintendent for communications, deputy superintendent for community engagement, deputy superintendent for student well-being, deputy superintendent for, and so as an experiment, I took the program and I took it home and I went to the Texas Tribune because, they publish all of the salaries.
Yep.
Millions and millions of dollars were being paid to the superintendent and the deputy superintendents. And if you add the number of superintendents and deputy superintendents in the public education system, oh my God, that's where our money's going. And we have teachers working their rears off for 50 grand.
And what's the salary of a superintendent? The average salary is about 300,000
at least.
It depends on the school district, right? Because you have smaller school districts and they're like around 200.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly between 200 and almost $500,000.
Yeah. And by the way, can I say this? Do you know what one of the most powerful lobbies are in the state of Texas? The Superintendents Association in the state of Texas. I mean, when superintendents come into the legislature, the knees and the state representatives and the senators start shaking.
Shaken. Mhm.
You know why? Because the superintendent in the school district is a very powerful person. So, our friends in the legislature, you've been in leadership for almost a quarter century in Texas. It's time you lead.
Okay, questions. I have noticed a big difference between public schools, with many having much worse education than others and much more drug use and violence than the others. How can we work to fix this?
Difficult problem, and I mean, clearly that's something that needs to be addressed on the local level by the principals, with more, a little bit more enforcement and what's having, and what have you. And I know that in some districts allow for inter-school transfer. So if you're having, your son or daughter having, experiencing that problem, you may apply for a transfer to another school, but that transfer is just fraught with a lot of corruption also, right? Because you need to get the permission of the principal of the principal of the school that your child attends, and then get permission from the school that you want to go to, and then that all needs to be approved by the superintendent. So there's, that, and what happens is that a lot of those transfers don't happen, and the problem stays in those schools and just gets more, it
And the
gets
parents and
aggravated.
the teachers are prisoners of the bureaucracy.
That's right.
As much as these parents want to improve, they can't.
Okay, a comment. Maria Sanchez says school choice will improve education quality. Teachers' unions are the root of the problem.
I 100% agree, and that has been what we've seen in our research, and that's one of the things that we have seen, that clearly, when you have more competition, we see this in business, right? All the time, that when you have more competition, the structures get more efficient, right? And the business of education should be about teaching the students. It shouldn't be about the business of education and making money at the schools. And there are a lot of vendors that do exactly that.
Rafa's exactly right. Can you folks imagine if we did away with Costco, Walmart, Sam's, Amazon, and when you had to go buy toothpaste and toilet paper and, let's say, a steak or some salmon for dinner, you had to go to a government store?
It'd be crazy.
I mean, are you kidding me? And that's what we have in the education system in this country, at least in this state. We have government education that is robbing our children, our next generation, of the ability to compete with the Indians in India, right? Who have tremendous educational infrastructure. We're robbing our kids of the ability to compete with China, Korea, Thailand, all these other countries who have a far better educational system at a lower per capita cost. It's time that Texans get involved in this issue. It's time that we, Latinos, share our views with our legislators and demand improvement in public education.
I feel that with all of these things going on, that it not only as I said, open our eyes, but I feel that our kids, like, I have 15 years old twins, you have a 5-year-old daughter, and I feel our kids
Boy.
has been, oh boy, I feel like our kids is like como los ratones de laboratorio.
Yes, guinea pigs.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they're doing an experiment with them, and I don't know what, if they're not self-educate themselves, if we don't, as a parent, we encourage them. Thank God these days for internet, and you can teach us a lot. That's it. I mean, it's like, I don't know what to do, and not all the parents have those tools.
Yeah, but you say thank God for the internet, but the internet and public universities are brainwashing our kids because they're getting information. I mean, did y'all?
No, what I mean is thank God of the internet that they have that tool. Yeah.
You mean to supplement their education?
Correct. These days.
Right. The internet is a tool both for good and evil.
But before, I mean, if this pandemic happened 20, 30 years ago, I don't know. I mean, like,
right.
It was not going to be a school online, or I don't know what's
But-
gonna
but- but-
happen.
but when she said internet education, I'm like, I mean, I like.
No. It's just as a tool
I
these
understand,
days.
but what I'm saying is, we wonder why the young people are out on the streets marching with the leftists in this country.
Well, I can.
What if you go to Google, you see the most ridiculous stories. If you go, I have been tracking this. I have been tracking this. Yahoo, and anybody watching today, if you can provide me with a positive story that Yahoo has done on President Trump, I will personally take you to a 5-star restaurant in Houston. You can email me. Hang on. You can email me, Orlando at orlandosanchez.com. I will buy dinner at the restaurant of your choice if you can provide me with a positive story that Yahoo has put out. And I know that he is not universally loved, President Trump, but surely he has done one positive thing. I've yet to see it on Yahoo. And Yahoo News, that's what our kids are getting. They're getting Twitter, they're getting Instagram, they're getting Yahoo. And I don't know if you folks saw this, but this week, the editor of the editorial board of the New York Times resigned. And in her resignation letter says, the masthead of the New York Times doesn't say Twitter, because the information that the New York Times is spewing to our population are Twitter feeds.
So
I said internet, not social media.
No.
Okay.
But
I didn't say social media.
So again, Orlando, I think that you're right on the mark, and this is something, in my opinion, and I know that there's some people that would call me a conspiracy nut, but you and I are both Cubans, and we've seen what happens in the outside world.
We've seen this movie
before.
before.
So we've seen this movie before.
So
we know,
has she.
yeah, and
I mean, folks, we're all immigrants or kids of immigrants.
So we have seen, and not only immigrants, but we have seen socialist systems come in and take out our country, our parents' countries, or in your case, your country, and that the quality of the education, specifically in the realm of American history and civics, has deteriorated certainly since the time that I've been in school, right? So, you're talking within the time span of, basically the 1960s and 1970s moving forward, the quality of American history and American civics has completely been downgraded. It has been whitewashed to the point where it's a speed bump, and the speed bump in many cases may be some sort of revisionist version of what the actual history happened.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Because I think this is where I hope that your colleagues and friends and funders of the Texas Public Policy.
This is one of our main issues in order for the state of Texas in order to try to fix.
So can I jump in?
Please.
So I hope your colleagues and donors are watching. Here's one of my pet peeves.
Go ahead.
Okay. Talking about altering history.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in Texas since 1962. And I am amazed that the history of Mexican Americans, particularly the Tejanos that fought side by side with the Texians in the 1800s to liberate the state, Texas, from Mexico, is whitewashed.
Absolutely.
I implore the Texas Education Agency, I implore teachers and historians to teach the history of the contributions made by our Tejanos and our Mexican Americans that have been in the state of Texas for generations. We can't say that we're going to provide a quality education and cut out a big swath of the population's history.
I agree with you 100%.
High five.
And I can tell you that at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, this is one of our, when we talk about education, this is one of our key components. And that we have, in last year, we were able to get, some grants to distribute pocket constitutions to different schools. And then now, with the pandemic, we're moving to a virtual education, and we're teaching teachers how to teach about history and how to teach about American civics. And not only that, but we are also going to be including specifically Texas history, because that is not being taught And included in that part is going to be the contributions of Navarro and Juan Seguin and all the
most people don't know Navarro
yeah,
signed the Texas
yeah.
Declaration of Independence.
He's not only a signer, but he also helped with the Constitution of the Republic. So these are people who had a tremendous amount of influence in the early stages of Texas, the development of the Republic of Texas.
You know who the first mayor in the state of Texas was ever? A Canary Islander, a Spaniard, in San Antonio de Bejar.
Yes, that's correct.
In fact, there is still a Canary Islanders Association, which are the direct descendants of the 14 families that came to, as you know, in the Canary Islands,
yes.
They shipped them out, right?
Right.
And half the family stayed in Havana. They went to Veracruz, and they finally ended up in San Antonio de Bejar, right?
That's right.
And so the first mayor of the state of Texas was a Spaniard, a Hispanic.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, we have comments. Okay, Bruce, we need more new Tadeo slots in HISD leadership. Stephanie says school choice is the way to go. Maria, it's a choice. School choice will improve education quality. Okay, well, I already wrote that. Teachers union keep the money and use the money to lobby politicians. The school in minorities, communities, areas are not receiving the money to improve the education. Bruce say, thank goodness for Catholic and parochial schools in Houston and in Texas. Think of how many more parochial schools will exist where the school choice vouchers and education would improve.
Man, we got a lot of comments.
Education system has been taken by radical left, and it is the
indoctrinating our children and our young adults. We need to review history books and bring civic classes to schools, educating children and young adults to love this country. That is Maria Sanchez. Maria's not my sister, but I like the way you think.
But I will say,
Maria's Colombiana.
These comments really, inspire me. They give me heart because the people know. People know. You all know what's going on. You know the real story and what needs to be done. And I will tell you, and just put a plug in for my organization, the Texas Public Policy Foundation. If you want more information on what we've been doing to promote education reform, please visit. It's texaspolicy.com. It's the Texas Public Policy Foundation. If you just want to write it out in your Google search.
Texas Public Policy
Foundation.
It's TPPF.
Let's see if our producer can.
Our producer Paola, who's at home. TPPF. TPPF. It's Texas Public Policy Foundation.org.
.com.
Así que, mira, quiero cambiar velocidades.
Yes.
You know what that means in English? I want to shift gears. So I want to shift gears real quick because one of your compadres in San Antonio, one of the Castros, hey, by the way, you know what I say? I fled the Castros. Listen to this. I fled the Castros in Cuba to fight the Castros in Texas. How do you like that? Anyway, we all know that the CEO of Goya Foods, Goya is an ethnic food producer, started here in the United States in the 1930s when their family emigrated from Spain.
Oh, I forgot my Goya can. I would have.
Black beans matter.
Of
you
course.
should have brought it. Anyway,
I ate mine.
So the CEO is invited to the White House along with some other CEOs across the United States to the Rose Garden to sign a executive order, basically starting the government, instructing the government to focus on education and entrepreneurship. Essentially, I can't remember exactly. And so several CEOs got up to speak. The CEO of Goya Foods said, Mr. President, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your leadership. You remind me of my grandfather. You're a builder. My grandfather was a builder. My grandfather started Goya Foods in the 1930s. OMG. You would have thought it was the end of the world. Immediately, people started calling on a boycott nationally for Goya Foods. Now, mind you, Goya has always stepped up and given food banks tons and tons and tons of food. They have continued to produce food during the pandemic, and they've done nothing but good in this country, and they employ hundreds of thousands of Americans, among them Hispanics. And what does the Hispanic leftists do? Mr. Castro in San Antonio, he called for a boycott of a successful Hispanic business. Really?
Well, they, the Castros in San Antonio, they just follow what the leftist programming happens out of Washington D.C., right? The George Soros and whatever their platform is spitting out. I think it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that actually led the call for the boycott. But
shocking.
It's shocking, right?
Shocking.
So here's the fundamental problem is this, folks. It's this cancel culture that exists now is that you cannot have a difference of opinion without it just being completely shut down, right? So nobody can say, well, you know what? I like the president, or I, like Republican values, or I love conservative values.
Or I don't.
Or I don't, okay? So the problem is that only their version of the narrative is acceptable. Everything else has to be canceled. Everybody else cannot have opinion. What happened? I mean, this is supposed to be, the land of the free and home of the brave. You should be able to have, a lively spirited discussion. That's what this whole country was founded on.
Yeah.
I mean, it took 10 years to actually develop the Constitution because the founding fathers were fighting with each other verbally over to try to see how the document is going to look.
And I'm glad Rafa brought that up. Just a little bit of history. Do you guys know who was the last holdout on the ratification of the United States Constitution?
I don't remember.
The state of New York, because they were worried about a big, oppressive federal government. My God, New York, what has happened to you in the short 200 and something years? You actually argued for a small government. You were afraid that a government in Washington would ruin your state, your agricultural industry, your industry, and you held out. And now New York is like, our people can't survive without big government. Oh my God, we've come a long way. Okay, look, it's almost noon. It's lunch hour. We all have to go out and go get our Goya beans. We have to go get our Goya frijoles negros and make arroz blanco, and so we can have
adobe, right? The adobe spice.
That's right.
Well, let me tell you something. I love to cook, and I cook.
Are you a good cook?
Oh my God! Ask my son that he's here. I'm a good one.
Yeah, very good.
You see, I love to cook. I have a passion for the kitchen, cooking for the family, and I love when my kids like, "Mommy, yummy! This is so good. Thank you." So I love it, and I have my pantry full of Goya products.
There you go.
I cannot cook without Goya products.
And do you have mojo in your?
I do.
home?
I do.
See, Cubans have to have mojo.
It's hard to find here in Texas, but you can find it.
So I've been posting since all this happened.
Oh, by the way, it's mojo translated. It's mojo.
Mojo
in English. Mojo. Get your mojo.
So, so I was like posting on my stories in Instagram, that I'm cooking for my kids with Goya and things like that. People start attacking me. Well, many people. Bravo, Andrea, que bueno por apoyar, Sophie, bueno, muchas cosas bonitas, but few people were like saying bad words, and I don't want to say it here, saying bad words to me, and like, you're being unfollow. I was like, okay, bravo, I mean, I don't care, but why I cannot cook with Goya? It's like, I mean, it's just like, it's
she
crazy.
Doesn't follow the leftist narrative.
Yeah, that's the whole problem. It's like, you should be able to express your opinion, and if people want to, boycott or you don't want to use a product, okay, that's fine. That's your business. But I mean,
By the way, I just heard today that Maduro in Venezuela has banned Goya. So the Castros in San Antonio, you have good company. You can't use Goya products in Venezuela.
I can imagine.
All right, guys. It's almost noon. Thanks for joining us. We do this every week.
Hungry.
I'm very hungry. We do this every week. We have a lot of fun, but we do it to educate you. We just don't feel that the Latino community and Texans across the state of Texas are getting an alternative voice, because if you watch the mainstream media, Hispanics and immigrants like us, because most of our guests, most of our programs include immigrants. And so we wanted to let you guys know that there's a lot of conservative immigrants in the state of Texas from every country in the world. We just happen to be Hispanics. She's Colombian. I'm Cuban. He's born in America. He's a Q-Tex. He's a Cuban light, but he's the son of Cubans. And so we want to share with you that we do have conservative views. The only problem is that our Latino community tends to be very quiet, very low key, doesn't participate in public policy, doesn't really get out and vote. And what we want to do is educate you and motivate you and engage you into the public policy process, getting you to vote. We want you to vote conservative. We want you to preserve the freedoms that we enjoy in this country as immigrants, our ability to participate in the capitalist system, our ability to earn the fruits of our labor, the ability to improve our children's future and our grandchildren's future. And we want our children to live in a free, open, democratic society. We've all fled communism. We've all fled socialist governments. We've all fled corrupt governments that are run by the narcos in Latin America. We love being in this country. We love America. We love our opportunities. And it's time that we, immigrants, Latinos, stand up and have our voices heard. God bless you guys. And we'll see you next week. Andrea, despídete.
Pues no, casi no dejas hablar, ¿verdad, Rafael? No nos deja hablar. Todo eso que dijo Orlando. Muchísimas gracias. Y además, pues, de la educación que nos gusta darles y la información que nos gusta darles también, ofrecemos clases de inglés acá cada miércoles. Así que, no, muchísimas gracias, Rafa, por estar con nosotros, por dedicarnos tu tiempo. De verdad que sabemos que manejaste desde Austin, por estar con nosotros. Así que, muchísimas gracias.
De verdad ha sido un placer estar con ustedes y con todos los oyentes aquí a través de la red. Y I thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. And Orlando is absolutely right. And I'm glad that he has this.
Will you tell my wife that?
We need to write a letter.
Is that, listen, democracy requires participation. If you just check out and you don't participate, and then what you're going to get are you're going to get little, tyrants all over the place. Here in Harris County, or in Bejar County in San Antonio, where I live, or across the state. Democracy requires participation of the people. If your government is not working the way that you want it to work, you need to raise your voice, you need to vote, and you need to let people know. So please participate. I know that we're going through an election cycle right now, certainly here in the state of Texas and across the country in November. You cannot stay silent, because if you stay silent, other people are going to choose for you.
Y yo voy a prognosticar que los que van a salvar el estado de Texas y mantenerlo libre para nosotros en el futuro son los latinos en este estado.
Definitivamente. Well, gracias. Thank you so much. And please join us every week, every Wednesday with TLC Live, and also go to our page, TexasLatinoConservatives.com, TexasLatinoConservatives.com, para que nos visite, para que se entere de muchísimas cosas que estamos.
And don't forget our scholarship.
Don't forget. Oh, yeah, talk about
We
that.
have 2 scholarships, not a lot of money, $500.
Talking about education, no?
Yep. So if you're a young person going to school next year, go to our Texas Latino Conservatives webpage. There's a scholarship application, fill it out, send it to us, and we'll send $500 to your school.
Okay, so it is like we are here to educate, to support. We have 2 scholarships to give away, and also we have full information in our webpage, and everything is in English and Spanish, linked, everything that you want to know about COVID-19, about the resources, about everything. And we'll hear every Wednesday, and thanks for joining us, and nos vemos el próximo miércoles.
Bye,
Chao,
y'all.
chao.